Donald Trump hitting the home stretch of this campaign, sprinting across key battleground states with just 4 days to go until America decides. Welcome to Happening Now, everybody. I'm Jenna Lee.
And I'm John Scott. In a race this close, the candidates are trying to leave nothing to chance, making closing arguments and trying to boost voter turnout as well. With Secretary Clinton hitting Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Ohio today, Donald Trump heads to New Hampshire, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. We have live Fox team coverage with senior national correspondent John Roberts on the Trump campaign. But we begin with Fox Business Network's Blake Berman live in Washington with the Clinton campaign. Blake.
Hi there, John. Jenna, good morning to you. Pick a swing state on this day, and chances are you are going to see one of the top Democrats campaigning there today. Hillary Clinton starts her day in Pennsylvania a couple hours from now and then moves on to Michigan. Those are two states that Democrats have won the last 6 presidential elections, but Clinton is now forced to defend those strongholds in the final days of the campaign here. She closes her day in Ohio and will be represented in states all over the map on this final Friday. For example, Tim Kaine campaigns in Florida, Bill Clinton, Colorado, Chelsea Clinton, New Hampshire. President Obama holds 2 rallies in North Carolina. The Vice President, Joe Biden, will be in Wisconsin, and Bernie Sanders stumps on the nominee's behalf in Iowa and Nebraska. Part of Clinton's final push today is trying to portray Donald Trump as too unsteady to occupy the Oval Office, a theme she has been hitting here for weeks. Here she was yesterday in North Carolina.
This is someone who at another rally yesterday actually said out loud to himself, "Stay on point, Donald, stay on point." His campaign probably put that in the teleprompter. Stay on point, Donald, stay on point.
Well, Clinton is also trotting out some big-name entertainment surrogates. Last night, she was joined by Pharrell Williams. Tonight's Cleveland stop features a Jay-Z concert, and tomorrow night in Philadelphia, Katy Perry will take to the stage for Clinton. And John, by the way, we just learned a little while ago, we were told Clinton's first stop today in Pennsylvania. She will be introduced by the billionaire businessman Mark Cuban, who will continue to needle Trump over the true value of his net worth. A lot going on in a whole lot of states. Send it back to you.
Spoken like a billionaire. Only can, I guess. Blake Berman, thank you.
Thanks.
We're waiting for Donald Trump's running mate, Mike Pence, to hold a rally in Michigan this hour. It's one big state where the Trump campaign is hoping to make inroads on Hillary Clinton's lead. In the meantime, polls show Trump closing the gap on Clinton in another of her so-called firewall states, and that is the state of New Hampshire. That's where our senior national correspondent, John Roberts, continues our team coverage live from that state. John?
Jana, good morning to you. You know, Donald Trump only has a couple of paths to get to 270 electoral votes, and one of those paths runs right through the Granite State here. A week ago, it looked like it was Hillary Clinton. She was leading by between 7 and 9 points, but take a look at this. A new Boston Globe poll out late yesterday has it all tied up in New Hampshire at 42 percentage points apiece. Donald Trump, when he arrives here in Atkinson today, will likely highlight the new jobs report. 161,000 jobs created, fewer than what was expected. And while Democrats are trying to put the good face on that, saying, hey, look at the unemployment rate dropped to 4.9%. Trump will point out that the labor participation rate has slipped yet again. The number that he will use today, of close to 500,000, may be a little high because that number also includes people who have voluntarily left the workplace to either stay at home with their kids or to retire. Donald Trump will also hammer Hillary Clinton today on her ongoing problems with email and the FBI investigation, as he did yesterday at this rally in Jacksonville, Florida. Listen.
The FBI is conducting a criminal investigation into Hillary Clinton's pay-for-play corruption during her tenure as Secretary of State. In other words, the FBI is investigating how Hillary Clinton put the office of Secretary of State up for sale in violation of federal law. The FBI agents say their investigation is likely to yield an indictment.
So expect more of that today in the states that Trump will be campaigning in. Wife Melania out yesterday for her first big formal speech since her convention speech back in July. It was in Berwyn, Pennsylvania, just outside of Philadelphia, trying to ramp up enthusiasm among Republican women, saying if she becomes first lady, she will make the issue of cyberbullying her primary issue. Listen to this.
People have asked me if Donald sees the president What kind of First Lady will you be? It will be my honor and privilege to serve this country. I will be an advocate for women and for children.
So Melania was expected to give 2 or 3 speeches before the election. It looks though as if that is going to be her final one. And Jenna, just before we go here, I want to tell you how significant New Hampshire can be and kind of scare the pants off of you as well. If Donald Trump were to win the big battleground states of Ohio, North Carolina, and Florida, then get Utah, Arizona, and Nevada. Sorry, memory's getting a little strange here. And then we're to win the 2nd congressional district in Maine. If he flips New Hampshire, it finishes up 269 to 269, and then we go to Congress to figure out who's going to be the president. Jenna?
Well, we'll see. The fact is that it is out there, John, so we have to watch all of these options and more reason to watch Fox News on election night for all the unexpected twists and turns of this race. Thank you very much. John?
Been a wacky year already. Why not end it with an electoral college tie? Donald Trump with some wind at his back, though, as 3 new polls out of New Hampshire put him in a dead heat with Hillary Clinton. A 4th poll by the American Research Group shows Trump ahead there by 5 points. Nationally, Clinton holds a 3-point advantage in the latest ABC Washington Post tracking poll. She leads Trump 47 to 44%. Joining us now, Glenn Hall, U.S. News editor for The Wall Street Journal. That 3-point lead, though, that's not shared by every poll.
That's right. When you look at the Real Clear Politics average, it's a 1.7-point advantage. And that's a pretty significant tightening from more than 7 points just at the middle of October.
Does that suggest that his momentum is going up, hers is going down, or is it a little bit of both?
It's a little bit of both, but more hers coming down in a lot of ways because in the revelations of Anthony Weiner's emails and all these new emails that were out there to be reviewed by the FBI, the renewed emphasis on that FBI probe, those were all very damaging to the Clinton campaign that thought they had put that behind them. But Donald Trump also has avoided some gaffes that he had in the past. Many of the things that came up a few weeks ago have not been dogging him as much now, and he's been out there on the campaign very heavily. So he's gained some momentum as well, but a lot of it was the damage to the Clinton campaign.
I know that you've been looking at some of the early voting trends. What are you seeing there?
Well, it's a mixed bag in a lot of ways. When you see the number of black voters who have historically been strong supporters of the Democrats and Hillary Clinton, they're not coming out in as big a fashion as we've seen in past presidential elections. But overall, Democrats are seeing more early voters than Republicans. So mixed bag there, but it's an important indicator. There's 30 million early votes already.
But isn't it traditionally Democrats who are more likely to be early voters than Republicans?
That's right. These patterns are not completely out of the norm, but they're indicative of how things may play out down the road and some areas that Clinton and others are worried about as they campaign out there, trying to make sure they get that black vote out. The turnout is critical at this point for both campaigns.
Well, and Donald Trump supposedly has the excitement, the more excited voters. Hillary Clinton's operation is said to be the one that is better at turning out their identified voters. So where do you weigh that one in the balance?
Well, it's the machine against the enthusiasm, I guess, if you want to simplify it down to that. And, that's an important thing for Donald Trump. When you look around, you see those Clinton surrogates are everywhere. You were just talking about that a minute ago. And there's a lot more of them. Only recently, as this race has gotten tighter, have you started to see Donald Trump surrogates showing up. We saw Ted Cruz out on the campaign with Pence, and you saw Mitch McConnell making a statement about how we need a Trump as president.
What about this revelation that the Russians may get involved in trying to, mess with the system or create some gigantic cyber hack on Election Day?
This should be a big concern for everybody. The whole notion throughout this campaign that Russians or any outside force were interfering with this election, that is in part a reality because WikiLeaks, wherever they're getting their information, and some of the other leaks, DC leaks and others, all of that have factored into this election in a big way. And, that's something that should be of concern.
Is the United States prepared for that?
Prepared for a cyber attack. It's interesting if you want to just step back and look at how the post-Cold War espionage is being done. Russia was much more aggressive at moving into this kind of direct to people rather than a country-to-country kind of espionage kind of thing. So it's a new ball game out there, and U.S. intelligence officials are adapting to it.
Glenn Hall, the U.S. News editor at the Wall Street Journal. Glenn, thank you. Jenna.
Well, as the bare knuckles campaign draws to a close, could this presidential race change how elections are held? We're going to hear from one Wall Street Journal writer that raises that question. Also, a field in rural America is probably the last place you'd expect to find these faces, what their preservation means for our past and our future. Plus, as the presidential candidates pull out all the stops with just 4 days to go, how is the media handling scandals dogging both campaigns? Our media panel weighs in, and we want to hear from you. Do you believe the Russians are trying to influence the U.S. election? Our live chat is up and running. Just go to foxnews.com. A Fox News alert from the nation of Jordan. One American service member was killed, 2 others critically injured in an exchange of gunfire today. It happened at the airbase just south of the capital city of Amman. A Jordanian officer was also wounded. We have no word on what prompted the violence, but we'll keep an eye on this developing story.
Some new revelations concerning Hillary Clinton's email problems as law enforcement sources tell Reuters that FBI Director James Comey was driven in part by a fear of leaks from within his agency when he decided to inform congressional lawmakers about the investigation of newly discovered emails related to the Democratic nominee. So how are the media handling this and many other scandals with just 4 days to go until the election? Let's bring in our media panel today. Judith Miller, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter, author, and Fox News contributor, and Lynn Sweet, Washington bureau chief for the Chicago Sun-Times. Welcome to both of you.
Hi, John.
Well, it was an October surprise like no other from Jim Comey, wasn't it, Judy?
Right. We were not expecting that. We were expecting either some kind of terrorist incident or something happening overseas or something developing here, but not an actual grenade thrown by the director of the FBI. And in the immortal words of Neera Tanden, and that is Hillary Clinton's best buddy and campaign advisor, Jim Comey ought to be drawn and quartered. Many Republicans and Democrats agree for what he has done, sending that letter to Capitol Hill, which he knew would leak, just as he did in the summer when he said there wasn't enough information to indict Hillary Clinton, but she had behaved recklessly with respect to classified information. He said too much then. He's doing the same thing now. It's just astonishing that this FBI director may be so afraid of leaks that he's willing to throw tradition, judicial procedure to the wind in order to protect his own bureaucratic butt.
But, Lynn, what was he supposed to do? I mean, if there are serious issues contained in these newly discovered emails, and that does not get revealed to the voting public until after the election, he would be accused of trying to aid Hillary Clinton's side to win the presidency.
I appreciate your question, but before we do anything else, talk about the big, wonderful November surprise.
All right, I know for the Chicago Sun-Times, that is the headline story.
The big story today, and everyone in Chicago is going to be out for a big parade for the Cubs, with the political angle, by the way, that the Ricketts family that owns the Cubs have political activists who are Republican and Democrats in the board that owns the Cubs. Now, back to regular programming. What was Comey supposed to do?
Yeah.
He was supposed to do the usual job that FBI agents do throughout my career and Judy's, and that is you say nothing until you have something to announce.
Okay, but
absolutely.
He did say, I mean, essentially he closed the book on the investigation back in July.
But he closed the book and then he wrote a new chapter after he closed it. I think that was Judy's point, wasn't it, Judy?
Yes.
That the FBI is full of people that know how to say nothing and to say nothing at length. It's one of the hardest agencies to crack when you're trying to report about what's happening. So the point is, people who are under investigation, especially in white-collar crime, which is what we're talking about, or political people in elected office, they go for years trying to get a statement from the FBI saying, am I clear yet? Is it over? Are we still doing it? It's hard. So Comey went too far in the summer, and when you're this close to an election, and he could have just let the investigation continue, or among the options he had, and maybe we're not even considering all of them here right now, I think the route he took was one that he knew or should have known would be controversial, sending a letter to Congress And the way he did is tantamount to putting out a press release.
Right.
But again, Judy, he is said to have been worried that his own agency, people inside his own agency, were going to say to the press, friendly reporters, hey, the Hillary Clinton email investigation is back on again. And if that gets whispered in the days ahead of the election, isn't it better for the FBI director to just put it out there and say, okay, we don't know what's in these, but we have to look at them?
Well, that's the issue. Put what out there? He put out the fact that he was now looking at another set of emails that may be absolute duplicates of what they've already looked at. He says he doesn't know, but he was in a position not to comment, which is standard FBI procedure, especially before an election, John. I mean, look, if he can't control his own agency, if he can't control leaks from an organization that's supposed to be not prosecuting, but just investigating potential crimes, what does it say about Mr. Comey's leadership ability or about the trust and faith that the investigators working for him place in him? I think he has done himself a great disservice, the FBI a great disservice, and perhaps, depending on how things come out on Tuesday, the country a great disservice. He should not have intervened at this point so close to an election. I think many Republicans and Democrats agree on that. Well, and certainly media people may have to cover this, but I'm not sure that we like it.
It's going to be interesting to see where all of these trails eventually lead. Judy Miller and Lynn, congratulations to your Cubs, Lynn Sweet. Thank you both.
Thank you, John.
She looks good in a hat, by the way.
Yes,
that
she
baseball
does.
hat.
Yeah.
Nice.
Not always easy to pull that off.
No, absolutely. Well, after a contentious election season, could party leaders change the way? Well, just 4 days to go, and many Americans are certainly ready for this election to come to its conclusion, its natural conclusion. An editorial about what may happen after this unusual campaign by Jason Riley today in the Wall Street Journal saying this, quote, the temptation to tinker with the presidential selection process that has produced the two most unpopular nominees in memory will be significant. If Republican and Democratic officials choose to go that route after this campaign season is behind us, what are the options? So could this election cycle change the status quo in many different ways? Jason Riley, senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, author of the book Please Stop Helping Us, How Liberals Make It Harder for Blacks to Succeed, and a Fox News contributor. Quite a title. Jason, it's great to have you on the program. Bottom line is, it's a very interesting editorial. Yeah. So explain to us what you mean, or what your idea could be for what we might see from the two major parties.
Well, you look at the unpopularity numbers of both candidates, and people are clearly dissatisfied with their choices. And I think our selection process had something to do with producing these two choices, and you might see some moves, particularly on the Republican side, to police this process a little more. On the left, you had the superdelegates, these Democrat insiders who have an outsized role in picking the nominee. They were able to keep Bernie Sanders at bay and ensure that their establishment candidate, Hillary Clinton, got the nomination. You didn't have that on the Republican side.
But some say that's a great thing, because those political insiders may have swayed the election away from the public choice, which could have been Bernie Sanders. So what about that?
And that's right. And that's what this move over the past 100 years has done. It's a progressive move to create more direct democracy. Don't have party insiders or parties in general picking the nominees. Let the people pick. But those political machines also served a useful purpose. They ensured that you got candidates that had broad consensus, that were more electable. There was less room to bring in a demagogue or a populist or an extremist who was going to ostracize people. And so we forget insiders are insiders for a reason, and maybe we need something in between what we have now and what we had back then. Okay. I mean, we don't want to bring back the boss tweed
so
political
what would it
machines.
Look like? Yeah. In your perspective, what would that look like for the Republican Party?
Well, I think partly this would have to do with changing some campaign rules, allow the parties to communicate directly with the candidates, allow money to flow directly to the candidates instead of being diverted to these outside groups that are less accountable. But basically let the political professionals do their job, and they do a particularly good job of getting people out to vote, getting more participation in the process.
But with the movements we've seen over the last few years, including the Tea Party movement, there are those that say, get those people out of there. The political insiders, the party bosses, all of that stuff, it's toxic to us. We want the power to be back with the people. What would you say to somebody with that perspective?
Well, that's what the move has been. Again, the more direct, instead of having the party insiders pick nominees, we have direct primaries where people are picking the nominees that way. And that's been the move, but it comes at a cost. It comes at a cost of getting more extreme candidates that are able to win and are less accountable to larger portions of the population.
What if that is the reflection of the public?
It may, in fact, be a reflection. And we're going to find out in 4 days if, in fact, an establishment candidate like Hillary Clinton, who has a machine behind her, can win against an outsider like Donald Trump.
When I was reading your column, I was thinking about the autopsy, so-called autopsy report that the GOP issued after the 2012 election. I'm just going to read a small portion of that because it's interesting. This is what it says. It would be a mistake for any one organization to think it can circumvent GOP voters and handpick our nominees. No one has a monopoly over knowing who is the best candidate. The electorate ultimately makes the decision. We need to have a participatory nominating processes. Based upon our experiences in recent elections, we understand and believe that voters, when given choices, will ultimately make better decisions than any outside group, individual, set of operatives, or activists. And some have used that particular suggestion during this campaign season because of Donald Trump, because there were so many party members that did not want to see him to be the head of the ticket. So how do you listen to something like that was issued just 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, and then apply it ahead as we will examine what happens this time around?
I think what has frustrated a lot of Republicans is that they were unable to do what Democrats were able to do to Bernie Sanders, which is to stop an outsider from infiltrating their party. Bernie Sanders was a registered independent up until a few days before the New Hampshire primary, where he became a Democrat. And a lot of Democrats said, you're not even a real Democrat. You're not going to get in. On the Republican side, you have what many consider a nominal Republican in Donald Trump that has been all over the political map in the past decade, but nevertheless was able to run under the auspices of the Republican establishment. And many people didn't like that. So I think that, there's something in between the system that the Democrats have and the system that the Republicans had. And we ought to find a happy medium here.
So begins the conversation. It'll be interesting. We'll see the results in the next few days, and then we'll talk more. Jason, really something to think about. We appreciate it very much. John?
A Fox News alert, we have learned that a jury has reached a verdict in the George Washington Bridge lane closing trial. That involves two key ex-allies of New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, Bridget Ann Kelly, and Bill Baroni. The 9-count the 9 counts against them have been decided on by the jury. We don't know what the verdict is yet, but as soon as we do, we'll bring it to you. Plus, Jenna has a larger-than-life tribute to our presidents of the past.
Standing in weeds as tall as these is totally worth it because I get to be next to these guys. Their full story after the break.
Well, as Election Day draws ever closer, authorities from nearly every state are asking the Department of Homeland Security to help make sure their election systems are safe from cyber attacks. This comes as federal officials take steps to counter any Election Day chaos, including cyber attacks that could spread misinformation about the candidates across social media. Doug McKelway joins us live from Washington with more on all of this. How serious a threat is this to the possible outcomes on Tuesday, Doug?
Well, John, in terms of a threat to distort or manipulate the actual vote count, probably not much. The reason the voting system in the United States is deeply diversified. Elections are done state by state, as we all know, and within each state, district by district, and polling place by polling place. And there's no single national tabulating center, no single internet server to connect them all. That said, there is little doubt among national security experts that Russia under President Putin has been trying to disrupt and to sow seeds of doubt about our election process.
The U.S. intelligence community is confident that the Russian government directed the recent compromises of emails from U.S. persons and institutions, including from U.S. political organizations. Next, these thefts and disclosures are intended to interfere with the U.S. election process. Can't get any plainer than that.
Johnson evidently referring there to the WikiLeaks release of DNC emails last summer, which resulted in the embarrassing ouster of DNC chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz during that party's convention, and perhaps to the present deluge of John Podesta emails that are damaging the Clinton campaign. Why not hacks of the RNC or of Donald Trump emails? Well, as Charles Krauthammer suggested in an op-ed just this morning, quote, Putin harbors a deep animus towards Clinton, whom he blames personally for the anti-Putin demonstrations that followed Russia's rigged 2011 parliamentary elections. Bear in mind that WikiLeaks founder, though, Julian Assange, in an interview with an Australian filmmaker, which is slated to air tomorrow, says that Russia is not behind the ongoing Podesta email leaks. All of this adding to further intrigue, John.
All right. There is Russian meddling in American politics, though, is nothing new, is it?
There have long been accusations that spies from the former Soviet Union infiltrated American political parties and political movements, some of it corroborated. According to former Soviet military officer and spy Stanislav Lunev, the Soviets spent more than $1 billion for the peace movements against the Vietnam War, which he called, and I'm quoting now, a hugely successful campaign and well worth the cost. John?
Wow. Doug McElway. Doug, thank you.
A Fox News alert and a big story out of New Jersey that is surely to make national news. We do have the results for the so-called Bridgegate trial, the traffic scandal that embroiled Chris Christie, the governor of New Jersey. Two of his close allies, Bridget Kelly, his former deputy chief of staff, and Bill Baroni, an appointee to the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Both of these individuals were on trial and the allegations were that they were political retaliation. They created a traffic problem on the George Washington Bridge. They denied these charges, but now we have the results from a jury of their peers, and they have been found guilty on all 9 charges right now. The governor, again, has denied any involvement, any knowledge of this. But if we go back to 2013, there is a Democratic mayor in a town right by the George Washington Bridge. He would not endorse the governor. And apparently, because of that, Bridget Kelly and Bill Baroni took the necessary steps they thought to retaliate against this mayor and cause a traffic problem on the George Washington Bridge, which we should mention is the busiest bridge in the entire world.
86 years in prison, the possible sentence for both of these two individuals after the conviction on 9 counts. It seems unlikely that any judge would sentence them to 86 years in prison given what has happened here. But that is the potential sentence for Bill Baroni, Bridget Ann Kelly, both former allies and close associates of the governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie, both of them guilty on all counts in that scandal. Both presidential candidates are pulling out all the stops in Florida with just 4 days to go. Why this battleground state could be the key to victory on Tuesday. They're also both spending time in New Hampshire, where the race could not be tighter. Why independent voters are taking the spotlight in the Granite State. Plus, Jenna's look at the presidential heads. You got to see this.
As the nation readies itself for the election of our next president, we wanted to share with you a look at something truly unique as we all reflect on who our next leader will be. Only a few miles away from one of the most important battles of the American Revolution, where our first president held his dying son, all the while securing our independence, we find a larger-than-life tribute to our nation's leaders tucked away from the public eye. But it's something that deserves to be seen by all. Take a look.
It may look like just any field somewhere in rural America, but down a muddy dirt road not far from the highway, we find a group of familiar faces sitting silently on a family farm in Virginia. 43 of them with one common thread, temporarily serving as leader of the free world.
Well, they wanted me to crush them and just get them out of the park, and I just couldn't do it.
Howard Hankins saved them after a private presidential park went bust. Turns out even presidents can't escape an economic downturn. So he moved them, each about 16,000 pounds of cement and steel, onto a flatbed truck and drove them down the interstate, painstakingly under power lines one by one, and lined them all up to wait for a better home. That was 3 years ago.
When you're here by yourself, what do you think about?
Well, some days cleaning the weeds up and neating the guys up, and some days your mind will wander into history and once again the sacrifices that these guys made. The decisions they had to make change all our lives.
Ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man.
If you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
You know what I think about when I look at all of these faces? You have 43 presidents out here. Is that there's a lot of them I don't recognize.
Yeah.
I feel terrible about that.
It's hard.
Luckily, we found someone to help us unravel the past. Historian Doug Weed.
It's sort of interesting to look at Abraham Lincoln and see the damage in the back of his head that was in transit trying to get these statues here.
Yes, this is all a metaphor for Abraham Lincoln. He was much more fragile politically than we think of today.
So why would he be comfortable amongst the weeds compared to the other presidents?
He was very poor. When we look at Lincoln and the Lincoln Memorial, it seems so imposing and powerful and strong. But he only lived 4 years of his life in the White House. He lived 14 years of his life in a one-room cabin in Indiana. And when he looked in the mirror, that's who he saw. He slept in a wooden box filled with corn husks and bare rugs and fleas and rats. There was no door. So the future of the United States hung by that slender thread. So that's why I say he wouldn't mind the mud at all.
The thing I hear time and time again is that we're in an election season like no other in history because there's a character in the election that's like no other, and that's Donald Trump. But you say that might not actually be the case.
Andrew Jackson was kind of a Donald Trump of his era. Here comes this guy from the West. He's profane. He uses bad language. He has a temper. He has bullets in his body from duels and from battles that he's fought. He's against the National Bank. He says it's all rigged, only he doesn't use that word. But he became the 7th president of the United States, and he took his revenge by appointing businessmen to most of the positions that normally would go to politicians. So it was an interesting time.
How did that work out?
It worked out quite well. There's good and bad about Andrew Jackson, but he was kind of a rock star in his time. History's very tricky. It's hard to nail down what you think people are going to believe and accept. How historians will judge history many years later.
So Howard, you say out of all these men, George is your favorite?
Yep, George is my favorite for sure.
And why is that?
The sacrifices the man made and the leadership he portrayed took a lot of courage.
You think out of all of these that George might be your favorite too, Doug?
If he's not my favorite...
it's hard for you to play favorites as a historian, right?
I say he's the best president in American history.
Really?
Because he walked away from power. That was the greatest gift he gave to America, to say, look, I have power, and I give it up to the people. And that became a great moral example, made it tough on all his successors.
Howard hopes to build a new park someday. In the meantime, the group will await its next member, weathering the elements under the weight of the wide-open American sky, as one president moves peacefully from power to the history books and a new leader emerges. Who will they be? What will define their legacy? Their stone-faced company and the country quietly await.
It's really something to see the whole group together, because you often don't see all the presidents together in one place just looking at you. And it really does make you think not only about the extraordinary men who were our nation's presidents, but also who will be next and how will we reflect on them, years from now.
Is this now on private property? I mean, can anybody go see them, or?
So it's on the private farm of Howard, and he put them there because he didn't want to crush them.
Yeah.
And he didn't know what to do with them, and he didn't have anywhere else to move them. So they're sitting on his family farm, and he's hoping to create another presidential park someday to honor all the presidents. He's a patriot. Howard, I mean, he figured out a way to do it with his own money, his own time, and they're just sitting there in the field. like his buddies.
And we're going to need a new bust soon to go with the rest of them.
That's right. There's only 43. So he says he does have a template for Barack Obama so that he can be added. And then, of course, we'll have to see who's next after that.
Wow, fascinating. Good job.